Hey, well, I am Donna Spence. I was one of the, well, a female comedian, came out around 23 years ago, out with Quincy, Mr. C, and all the rest of them, and done many projects. I think it's definitely for New Black Film Collective as well. Um, Toured all around the UK, worked abroad. Yeah, and I left comedy like 2019. I left stand up, but I still host and I still do events. But yeah, still was a great scene then.
Okay, amazing. Well, let's start with what inspired you to start stand-up comedy in the beginning?
I actually fell into it. I didn't actually plan to be a comedian, as most people now plan. I actually fell into it, and I just I can't. I'm trying to remember. Oh, Nina Benjamin. She was doing a project called now usually I remember, I can't. Give me the mic. It was called Give Me the Mic. It was in Dalston, and she said, come, just fill in the numbers. I need some people. I said, I don't know how to tell jokes. She goes, yeah, you're funny, just come. So I used to go to all their events. Jeff Schumann, I used to go to all these comedy shows, and I was always the biggest mouth in the place, bringing the most people. So they just thought it'd be great for me to be a comedian. Everyone kept telling me to be a comedian, but I just couldn't see how that would be possible. Um, and then I went and done this event, and it actually, I came first. Jimmy Carr, the famous Jimmy Carr now, I beat him at the time. So, but Jimmy, he, good on him. He's worked hard to get where he is, and well done to him. And so I beat him at this competition, and then after that, I literally wasn't going to do anything, and I got booked straight after that by Jeff Schumann and another guy called Kwaku. And then after that, um, I saw Angela Ma, and I said to Angela Ma, I asked her for some tips, and then she took me under her wing and she started managing me. And then for the next, and I was on Choice FM radio, and we used to do the midnight shift, the ladies' room, and then the doors just opened up, and at that time I don't think I could handle it. I really don't think I can handle, because you get whooshed into this thing that you have no idea about where it's going, what it is, and you're just moving, because there wasn't that many female comedians then anyway. There isn't now, to be fair, but there wasn't that many then. So the doors were really wide open, and I was really blessed to have Angela Marr guiding me. So I was spoiled, literally spoiled.
Amazing. So how did where you grew up influence then your comedy?
Yeah, so because I was raised with mum and dad. I have that whole, I don't know, I none of my all my family's married. So everything I came across was about relationships. And it would always be about, my thing was about bringing back the love. So when I saw all of this about men of this and men of that, I didn't fit into that criteria, and I wasn't going to bring that. I was going to bring, let's bring the love. When a man does this, when a woman does this, when you come together, when you pray together. When I was very family orientated, and sometimes I kind of felt a bit isolated with that, because it felt like everyone wanted to go on the bandwagon of being single, like it was a great thing. And my thing was, no, let's get married. Let's stick to marriage. Let's keep family. Let's do this. And so I was kind of lucky, because a lot of the times I was on the bill, it would just be me as a female and majority men. And you'd find women. So out of London was completely different to being in London. So out of London, everybody wanted to have that relationship. They wasn't playing that single game. So some of them borrowed people's men, but anyway, so you could break the myths and they would understand. And you'd find a lot of women come and say, oh, you've answered some questions for me about my relationship. And I didn't look at, because I was straight up. I was like, if you've got somebody else's man, you're a thief, and you know what's going to happen to you. What goes around comes around. I didn't play. I didn't play with it. So I was very much known for that. So growing up where I grew up and around the families I did had a great impact on me and what I could deliver.
Mm. Right. So with all that around you, how was it developing your comedy and creating the Stratford comedy scene? Touched on it a little bit, but
So when you talk about Stratford, we done a thing called, we started off at Stratford Circus doing Big Brother, Big Sister, which was a spoof of Big Brother. So a lot of the scenes we wrote in that was everyday life, things that happened in everyday life. So Quincy was part of that. Owen, who's gone away, passed away, God rest his soul. Mr. C. There were so many, because there was like 9 of us new comics, and we wanted to develop something because there was all these older comics and they wouldn't open the doors for us, so we had to open our own doors. So Stratford allowed us to do that. Stratford allowed us to go ahead. Stratford's always been very open, to be honest, because they let in new talent, old talent. Just as long as you've got a talent, they open the door. So Stratford was really, really good for that, to be honest.
Mm. So how do you feel then that the Stratford comedy scene has changed over the last decade then?
I think that, in my own personal opinion, I feel that nobody's really pushing the boundaries. They're keeping confined and they're not pushing past that boundary where we used to do that. But now it's just so I think that there's a limited information, right? So in my time of comedy, for example, you had to read 4 newspapers a day. You read 4 newspapers a day, you watched online, you done whatever you did, and you went out there and done your stuff. And that night was brand new material or whatever it would be. You still had your base, but now I just feel like it's just it's not enough. So you've got all social media, but there's sometimes we're not using it in the right way. And I think if we bring that new, it's like a new recipe. If you add something to it, it can give you that flavor. It just takes someone to come in and just do that little thing. And I think it will just blow up again.
Yeah, okay. So with that and with the changes, what is the difference then about the Stratford comedy scene that is distinct from the other areas?
It's from other areas.
Yeah.
So Stratford is almost like it's a city. It's almost like its own city. You've got so much going on. So you can be anytime. You can be. There's a different complex of people. Everybody from every part of life comes to Stratford. Stratford is like for South London, Brixton. Everybody can. It doesn't matter whether you live in Walthamstow, you'll go to Brixton. It doesn't matter. Stratford's becoming that because of the shopping area that's there as well. So you've got different flavors of people who are open more to comedy now. It's in fact, it's I would say, okay, so I take this and I kind of contradict myself when I say this. They're less offensive now, but in the same time, we on the comedy are not allowed, because society, politically incorrectness, you're not allowed to say certain things. So you've got the people from all walks of life who are open, but politically you're not allowed to say. So how Stratford to me differs from everywhere else is it's open. It's more open. It's going to say, actually, don't worry about that. Say what you want to say, as where somewhere else be different.
So do you feel then that there's opportunities or more opportunities to grow and progress your comedy career in Stratford?
100%, 100%. I think if they really work it together, I think it could blow the scene. I think that would be the new vibe. That would be the new place. I think you could do that internationally. You'll find that people will come over, because really, when you start booking comics from Belgium and America and wherever, Stratford could be the place of that. That is the new Hackney Empire. It could definitely be. There's no two ways about that.
Mm. So would you be able to tell us a little bit more about the details about what your first gig within Stratford was like?
My first gig after doing Give Me the Mic was in High Wycombe. I thought I wrote about 10, 12 minutes material, which you think you do when you're writing. And when you're at home practicing and you're practicing the mirror and you're walking around your house, you think you're the bee's knees and you know what you're doing. But then when you get in front of an audience, it's something else. So I was on with Dibby Wayne Rollins and Sandra B. I can't remember who it was, Jeff Schumann and Ninia Benjamin, I think it was. And I must have done 5 minutes if you were lucky, because in my head it seemed like 10 minutes when you were writing, but actually when you perform it was something else. So lucky I was funny, but they were just like, we want more. And I had no more to give. So I was just standing there going, Jeff, can you come take the mic? Because I haven't got nothing else to say. So that was funny in itself. So I had to kind of learn. And I'm not one of these comics that really look at the time. If I don't feel I'm doing well, I'll get off the stage. And I'm very quick to say to promoter, you can deduct my money, I'm cool. Because it's what the audience left with. I've got a really beef about when comics keep on looking at their watch every minute. I'm like, no, I get you have to look at your time. And I think that's probably why I got into hosting, because hosting allows me to control everything. So I still host events, but it allows me to control everything and allows me for the promoter to make that person finish on time and keep it all together. But yeah, stand up was my very first gig. Yeah, I done about 4 or 5 minutes if you're lucky.
Right. I know you said that you fell into doing stand-up comedy, but which comedians did inspire you growing up?
So Angela Marr was one of my favorites, especially for here. Angela Marr, Curtis Walker was one of my, definitely, because, and still he has that thing. The late Felix Dexter, when you talk about UK, the late Felix Dexter done it. Ishmael, when you talk about Curtis and Ishmael, when you talk about Rimmer Coyle, Luella Gideon has a great eye for stuff, and the way that she can work it. So, you know, yeah, and for today, Quincy and Mr. C are kind of my favorites, and the reason for that is Mr. C is one of those that you kind of go, he's on stage, you kind of go, did you just cuss me? Did you just say, like, he hits you, and he's very suave. So, and Quincy is definitely your Cockney Prince. He is just come and tell you. They say the things that people want to say but are scared to say, and I think that's the difference with comics today. To be fair, I haven't been to a very good comedy show for a while, but from what I see, once you become a comedian, you have to know this is the rod that you carry. So if you upset somebody, even though you don't want to, because we're quite sensitive, really, you don't want to upset somebody, but there's truths. And it may not be your truth, but it's a narrative of what goes around. So you have to look at particular areas. And this is where Stratford, I come back, this is where Stratford is really good. There isn't a particular area for Stratford. That's why it's a bit like Hackney. Just because you live in Hackney doesn't mean that everybody there is from Hackney. And that's what Stratford brings. Stratford could be Forest Gate. It could be, Dagenham. It could be South London, because South London goes everywhere. So it could be anybody. And that's why Stratford is so unique in its way as well, because it has that thing, that it has the shop. So you can bring everything. Sorry, I know I digressed a bit, but yeah, sorry. But that's the difference. And so yeah, my favorite comics would be them. American wise, oh gosh, some of them you may not even heard of, but B Flat is one of them, one of my favorites. Male wise, yeah, there's so many. I'm just trying to think on top of my head. Kevin Hart's great. I think I personally like Kevin Hart before he really got famous. When he used to come here at Leicester Square and stuff, and we used to hang. I think I liked him better then than now, but I know what it goes like. But he's still a very good comic. Steve Harvey, I absolutely love, because when you're talking about life experience and somebody showing you who they are, you can't beat that. You can't beat him at all. Some have passed. John Simmet, who plays Dipsy here, he has an eye, but he's also a booker. Amazing. So there's lots. There's lots. I liked Monique back in the day. The comedian Monique. I liked her back in the day. But yeah, there's quite a few. I've got a very big range of comics I like. But my favorite, Joan Rivers. I don't know if you know about Joan Rivers, but Joan Rivers is a white comedian, an older lady that died probably about 5 years ago. And I had the pleasure of meeting her. And she was a Jewish comedian who said things that you just went, did you really say that? But she was hilarious, absolutely hilarious. And Whoopi Goldberg is amazing as well. So there's quite a few.
Yeah, that's amazing. You've got a proper pool of inspiration and just amazing comedians. And I know Joan Rivers. I was all over.
Oh, excellent.
When you talked about your first gig as well, and how kind of you think it's one thing in your head and it turns out to be another thing, what else did you struggle with the most starting out?
Believing I was funny, because I didn't choose it. So I would, and also because at that time I was looking after my parents. My parents were ill and I was looking after them. So you imagine you're working, you look after your parents, then you got to go on stage. And then I think the most scary thing is if people didn't know me, I was okay, because you didn't know what to expect. There was no expectations. But when people would come at me, oh my gosh, Donna Spence, you're so funny. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to see you tonight. I would literally go in a panic, because I'd be like, oh my gosh, I've got an expectation. What am I going to do? Suppose I die. Suppose I die on stage. And so people put this on you. So I used to I'd get to the event really early before anybody. I'd be in my room and I'd be rewriting, so I wouldn't see anybody. I would do my stage check the stage early, because I always say to comics, don't just turn up, hit the stage. You got to walk that stage, no matter how small or how big it is. You got to walk that stage and feel it and see what you would feel and how you have to almost visualize the audience being there. So I'd get there before anybody, except for me and the technicians there, and I would stay where I was and then watch other comics come. And I really wouldn't joke about. In fact, most people probably thought, "Oh, she's really quite serious. She's not that funny." And then I'd hit the stage and it'd be different. But I would. It was anxiety. I would have anxiety, panic attacks before I get on stage. And people had this expectation that I was just funny, and I didn't have it. I was like, I might be funny with my friends, but hitting on stage is another question. So I had that. Those were some of the things. And give me a big stage like Hackney Empire, fine. But if you gave me a smaller stage, it was more intimate, I would literally die. So if I had an audience 36,000, I didn't want to know how much people is in the audience till afterwards. But you know, when people come, oh, it's all sold out, I'd be like, I don't want to know, I don't want to know. So I'd panic. I'd literally panic. So yeah.
Compared to the smaller stages and the biggest stages, or just anything that you've done, what has been your favorite memory then from a show?
So the smaller ones, the thing about it is it's a lot more intimate. You're allowed to bring more new material. I didn't speak to anybody in the audience for about 5 years, but the smaller ones allow you to speak to people and find out who they are. So what you find out with the front, the smaller ones, is they don't mind sitting at the front because they feel close to you. They trust you, because it's all about your audience trusting you. And don't get me wrong, there was some gigs in the beginning, if I knew it was small and I knew the venue, because I'd go and check out the venue, just like, I'd go and check out the venue before I go. And if it was small and I didn't, in prayer, and I didn't feel like it, I would just say I wasn't available. Because I was a perfectionist. I am still, but not as bad as I was then. So the smaller ones allow you to be intimate, especially if it's like a music one. If it's if you're going to have music with it as well. So the smaller ones was a lot more intimate. It was much nicer, and the bigger ones allowed you to really act. You could really go, "Hey, what's up?" and they would gravitate back to you. So there's a thing about, because it's really about how the promoter promotes it. Because if the promoter hasn't promoted it well and it's a small venue and they haven't promoted it well, it's going to be quite dry. If you haven't got the right DJ, because everything works. So what happens is they expect the comedian to save the whole day, but you haven't put the right things in place. So if you haven't got a good DJ who's playing the right music, and you haven't promoted it well, it's going to be really difficult for us as a comic. We've got to give time to warm them up, and their beef might be with the promoter who charged them too much, and we got to suffer that. So I used to like bring my own CD, because we had CDs then, bring my own CD and say, "Can you put that on as house music, please, and warm up the place? Like, I need this on 10 minutes before I'm coming on so we can change the atmosphere." Like, I was literally had to think like a promoter. So it's not just one dimension we come from, or I didn't see it that way, but I was trained by Angela Ma, so she taught me how to be, so I became a real perfectionist about it.
Yeah. Was there any crowds then that you performed with that have been particularly tough?
I remember one time I was at Southport Weekender. Well, it was just finished actually a few years back. I was at Southport Weekender, and I think my mother had passed like not so long before, and I was terrible. Like, and this is a gig that I do every year, and this has about 2,000 people, and it's jam and it's packed, and everybody knows that you do a good gig and they can't wait to see you. And my head went. There was things that because you can do, especially when you're doing relationships in comedy, you can't afford to miss out certain words, because if you miss out certain words, it can change the whole dynamic. So I must have missed out certain words, and it looked like I was anti-women and I was into men. Like, men are great, men are this, and women are. That's how I kind of came across, but I didn't mean to. And I was like, why are they not laughing? Usually at this point they're laughing. I died on stage, and to the point where I could hear the promoter. Right, the promoter didn't know I could hear them, and up to this day, I don't think they know this, so they hear it if they see this. The promoter said, "That's why we shouldn't book her, because she's shit." Do you know what I mean? And there were young promoters, and I understood it, and I felt so embarrassed. I hid myself for that whole weekend, literally, because you like when you die on stage, you see people looking at you like, all right, like they don't want to really make eye contact with you because it's embarrassing.
Oh my gosh, no, that sound tough. That does sound like a tough one.
That was the worst one. That was the worst one.
How then do you handle telling your jokes to an audience from a different background?
So I don't really do when I started, I used to do mainstream. I don't really do the white circuit, really. I think it's different now, though. It's much different now. Now, because where everybody's so kind of understand each other, everybody mixes more. But at the time, I didn't because I just felt uncomfortable. It's a different wave of laughter. It wasn't because they were white and I was black. Nothing to do with it. It was more to do with there's a different wave of laughter. There's a different rhythm when you are in front of a black audience, they're showing you how much they're going to make you know. Yeah. And they're so lovable that even if you're not doing so well, they go, come on, come on, so they've got you. When you were doing a mainstream audience, that even if you were done fabulously, you wouldn't know sometimes because they'd be like, and especially the later it is, the drunker they're getting, the harder it is. So it's only when you come off stage they go, you were amazing. You're like, really? So you wouldn't know. So you've got to go when you go on mainstream, you kind of do your joke. It's almost like there's no feeling in your joke. You do your joke, you get it out, you kind of know where the rhythm is and you can play it a little bit, but you kind of it's a different level. Because I remember when on my stage, when a lot of the black comics were on the mainstream, you could see the difference when they came on the black circuit because they were happy. They were like, yeah, because they knew they were going you need that revving up. And the mainstream circuit at that time didn't give me that. And so I decided I wasn't doing mainstream. It didn't matter how much money it was. I'd done it a few times, and I won. I remember I won Leicester Comedy Circuit or Comedy whatever it was festival back then years ago. And I remember I'd done a thing called Malign Monologues on BBC, and it was Russell Peters, who's a Canadian Asian comic who used to be here all the time back in the day. And they wanted this thing where they were doing they wanted to do this black and Asian comedy. They said, what we want, Donna, is, we want you to tell the difference between blacks and Asians. I said, no, you don't. No, we do. I said, no, you don't. And they were like, oh, I said, okay. So we done this thing at the Sound in Leicester Square. And Russell Peters brought me on and he said, Donna Spence is the epitome of what an Asian woman should be. So, of course, I've come out and it was filmed before. So I think we was in Birmingham and we'd done it 3 different places. And we done this thing, and I said, I can't remember fully the joke, but I made the joke and said, blacks and Asians are very similar. Us as women, we both like to season our food. We both like to please our parents because our parents are strict. The only difference is we keep our babies, And everyone was like, the Asians were laughing because Asian girls knew you couldn't lie down with a black man because if you lie down with a black man, you couldn't keep that child. They were going to kick you out. So they knew what I meant. So they were laughing. Everybody was laughing. Of course, when they put out the material, they edit it out completely. So I'd learned a valuable lesson from a long time ago, which was anything to do with TV, unless I'm in the editing booth, well, I'm not doing it. So that would never happen because way they edited you for TV here, in my opinion, is they miss that. They don't know how to do a black comic, so they miss out the jokes and they miss out. So unless I'm in that editing room, I have no interest in that TV world at all.
Okay, yeah, that whole editing, like changing the scenes, that's something that's become really prevalent, and it will also link to how do you feel the shift towards social media and streaming has changed comedy?
Right. So streaming is when, remind me, streaming is when they.
Streaming would be similar to what they'd put on Netflix, the same thing you were talking about,
Right.
that they get the comedy set and then they edit it up and they put it up and that sort of stuff.
Right. So I think on the social media thing, I think we have more control of that, because if you go back to Judy Love, who I think is another one who's an amazing comic, and reminds me of me when I started out, to be honest. when she was doing her social media, which is why they took her, because her social media was so high, the way she could put out her stuff is what made her, which is absolutely hilarious. Now, when you see on TV, I can see where they're editing her funny. Do you know what I mean? So for me, there's big differences with that, as where she's still very funny, but I know she's even funnier when you allow her to be who she needs to be without you clipping it. So I think there's a difference when you talk about America and you talk about Europe. Totally different, because when you're talking about America, if especially if you're a black comic, you have probably black editors and black filmmakers and black cameramen. As we're here, if they don't know you and don't grow with you, you can't do my story. You cannot edit me the way I need to. I have to be in that editing room for you to edit me the best way I can, or to come across, because you don't know my story. You have no idea. But in America, they get it, so they allow you to be who you need to be, so they can be the best they can be. So I think that the social media side, there's a lot of people who, and I say this mainly for the men, the male comics, because being a female comedian takes a lot, because you have to go through so much, because technically we're the ones who are raising families. Not saying men are not there, but we are the ones that have to hold the house down and deal with families and go to work and deal with all what's going on. That's been put on us. So to be a female comedian, you have to go through so many barriers first anyway. And then, so for males, I feel like every year, I think around about December, January, there's an influx of about at least 20, 25 new male comics. And by the time you get to about May, June, that influx goes down to about two, because they realize you're not as funny as what you thought you was. Your friends told you were funny and you believed that you were funny, but actually you're not that funny, because you realize there's more male comics than there is females, for example. So if there's X amount of males, you're not saying anything different than they are. And that's where the lack of knowledge comes from.
Yeah.
Sorry, did I digress a bit? Sorry.
Oh no, that was straight on. That was great. Just expanding more on that, how over the past 20, 30 years do you feel your material has been affected by political correctness and cancel culture?
So I'm really lucky, because just when I saw it coming, I left. 2019, when I saw it, I was like, yeah, I can see the smell. I'm not doing it. And then 2020 obviously happened. And if you were when you were allowed back into the theaters, it was like, you're not allowed to say this, you're not allowed to say that. Like if you're doing the Apollo, you can't make this joke, you can't make that, you can't do that. And I'm so glad I left stand up, because if you start to censor a comedian, you might as well forget it. So that's why I don't really care for those big places. It censors you. You're not allowed to say. So you're not allowed to say like things with the transgender thing. You're not allowed to say anything about that. So, and my thing is that real people need to say real things. We need to stop being so offensive, because everyone's so politically correct and everyone takes offense to things. When I was growing up, and even the generations before me, my parentage is Jamaican. So if you had somebody who had six fingers, the nickname was Fingers. He didn't take offense to it, but that was your nickname. So let's call it what it is. And if anybody troubles you, we've got you. So that person grew up with a sense of strength, so that nothing could offend them. And that's really what you got to do. But now you're not allowed to. So people are so protected that brings on anxiety. Like once you deal with something, it's like, I was taught again by Angela Marr, if you wear something, at that time I was a lot bigger, and you know that you're fat, you got to go on stage and go, I tried to put on this jacket, it was too tight, but I was going to wear it anyway. That's the joke. And instead of somebody in the audience going, did you see her jacket? It was too tight for her. If you say it and you call it out, you've covered. So I left before that political correctness, because I just wasn't going to do it. And that's what stopped me from really caring about being on the mainstream, because I would call it what it is. This is black, this is white. We're different. It's different, but it's up to you if you can be open to it. I think today's a lot better, because you've got the younger generation that mix with everybody. So there is not saying there's no differences, but we understand each other. My problem with today is that some of the comics today fall into that myth. Instead, like for me in comedy, my thing is to set that straight. Like not every black person is from Jamaica. And no, we don't all, just because you might come from Africa, no, you don't live on a dirt road. So my thing is to change the myth. But what I find with a lot of comics is they go into that myth, and then people will believe that stereotype. And so I think that we have a great responsibility, as even though I'm not a stand-up comedian, but I'm still a comedian, we have a great responsibility to change that narrative and let people learn, because people are listening to us. If you think about a politician, we're not much different, even though I don't like politics and I don't do anything to do with politics. But in terms of listening, they will listen. We have the right to change the narrative. People will listen to what we got to say, because they'll go, I never thought of it that way. Or we remind them of themselves. That's what we are as comics. That's what makes them gravitate to you, because you remind them of themselves.
How do you feel then, from before you left stand up and maybe even after now, over the past 20, 30 years, your audience has changed?
So it's kind of weird actually, because I'm now known more for like hosting events and doing things. I'm surprised about the amount of young audience I have, which I'm like, wow, where did you come from? What I have noticed, especially since I call it the pandemonic, the COVID time, is that it was changing, and now it's kind of going back to the old way slightly, because people want some meat, they want some food, they want a difference. So I've noticed that, because I keep getting calls for bookings for comedy, and I'm like, no, I don't do stand-up. And people are trying to push me. They're offering me all kinds of money. I could almost turn around and say, I'll charge you $1 million, and they'll pay me. That's how that's how deep it is getting. So I think it's in the last 3 years, the shift has come back around again, when they want the old comics back. They want something new because they're getting tired. Because what's happened is that even though the comedy scene has changed from the older to the younger, because so if you pass the baton on from from before Curtis to Felix to Angie, I think before them Collette Johnson, you pass the baton on, and that was my generation, Mr. C, Quincy, myself, Kojo. If you pass that baton on, from there to where it is now, it's changed completely, but it changed in a way that they've got no foundation. So where there's no foundation, there's going to be a loss, and that's where it's now. So hence why they're coming back for my generation now to come back and hold it up. And you've got young, you've got old, and they're really getting it because they want direction. So what you've got today, generally, you've got a lot of people say that they're in relationships and it's not working because there's no foundation. So when you've got, and comics that may be coming out saying things, if they've not come from that home where they've seen both mum, dad, or uncle, because it's not just mum, dad, it takes a village to raise a child. If they're not coming from that and there's no comic to say it, and this is the thing, there are some comics that literally come from that, let's say the male ones, but they don't portray that on stage because they feel like it's better to act the gangster type or whatever it is. So you're literally scared to tell your audience who you really are. And that's scary. Is where America, they thrive on, I'm together, I'm married, look at me, da da da. They thrive on that. You might get one or two who don't, like Corey Holcomb, who plays on, even though he's happily married, he plays on the you women are such and such, and yeah, man, go get what you got to get. But he's happily married, and everybody knows that's really just a character that he plays. But I feel that it's changing. I feel like they're coming back for the older ones, and the younger comics actually want to learn from us again now.
Yeah, yes, I do see that.
Do you see
What?
that? Good.
Yeah, yeah. What was your favorite part then about being a stand-up comedian?
Oh, I think that there's so many great gigs I've done. Like Hackney Empire is definitely still always going to be one of my favorite places to perform. And I think it was watching this audience. It was like the amount of time sitting, because I was a singer before I was a comedian, and I left singing years before. And I think it was that dream as a little girl sitting in the audience. So there was a play called Ippy Tomby years ago when I was a little girl that my sister took me to in Hackney Empire. And so I was about 6 when I went to this. And I remember sitting there as a little girl going, wow, I want to be on that stage one day. So I think the beautiful thing is actually being on that stage. And so they say, write your visions on tablets, like have a vision. and that will come true. And if you watch a child at Christmas, or a child, when the child wants something, a child will go, I want that bike, I want that bike. And they just stare at the TV, or they stare at everything to get that bike. And they get it. They get it. And it's exactly the same. Like, that's what was for me for Hackney Empire. That was it for me when I was the Apollo in America. That was it for me when I was like, oh my gosh, when I created my own shows, it was like, wow. So for me, it's like, the beautiful thing for me is when I became an event organizer, was putting that audience, because it's scary, because you think, is anyone going to come? And then all of us, especially with Black audience, because they don't buy their tickets to the last minute, as we're white audience, they buy their tickets early, and you know that, in advance. But Black people, they just rock up. You're like, is anyone going to come? Do I have to cancel the show? And then you just see this audience, you see people. I think that's changed as well, though. I think today people are buying tickets earlier, especially when you talk about theatre. If you're just talking about the wine by the go, I see how it is. But since COVID, people are more respect of going, I'm going to get my tickets early because I actually want to be at this place. As where before, and especially in London, because you take it for granted, you can do comedy anywhere or be anywhere. As we're out of London, you can sell out before you definitely sell out before you even get there. So for me, it's that stage. It's that I still love stage. I still love hitting that stage. I still get inspired when I sit in the audience and watch somebody on stage. I love dressing the stage, because I wish more comics would do that. If you're going to do a show, dress the stage, because you're coming out and you're paying your money. And if you're an audience member, our job is to change things for you, because you don't know what you're going through. We don't know what you're going through. So, for example, people be in your audience who just found out they've got the big C. They bought their tickets 3 weeks ago. Nobody knows. Their friends around them don't know. The people they've come with don't know yet. And you're on stage, and that person's sitting in front and they're sad. Now, your job as a comedian is to look and kind of go, you know what, I'm not going to pick on them. Because laughter comes from the back and trickles down. So let me, joke about, and then we'll see. And you'll usually find that person comes to you after and go, you really made me laugh. Thank you so much. And I knew that you could feel me, but this is the news that I had and no one knows yet. Like, you become their therapist, you become everything. So all of those little elements are beautiful for me on stage, because you change people's lives. So I love stage because it does that. I love the fact that you can think about that person, and because it's all walks of life coming in through your door.
Wow, that is amazing. That someone confides in you like that. That comedy can do that.
Yeah.
Within comedy, then, you spoke about it previously with relationships. What was your favorite thing to talk about? What did you like talking about through your comedy?
How we speak to men, how you can get anything out of a man if you know how to shut your mouth. That was kind of my thing. I'm like, girl, why are you worried about that? That man will marry you. He'll pay everything for you. Just stop acting like a gold digger. Stop. Like, I would literally tell women what to do to get that man. And the beautiful thing is, there's many weddings that I've hosted from that, where people have gone, yeah, I was at your shows. I've been to all your shows, and guess what? I took your advice, because obviously I was classed. Now I'm classed as Auntie Donna. I was because I became a comedian at 30, so it's a bit late for most comedians are earlier. So I came a comedian late. And so I could go on stage and do that. And so it's really, really nice, because you find, and men, because my biggest the funny thing is that people think it's women, but my biggest audience is men. Men are my biggest followers everywhere, because they like how I speak for them. So that is another amazing feeling. I've never had a man, I don't think I can remember a man coming to me and saying, what you said about men was wrong. If anything, I've known men to bring, and some of those men are still good friends with me now, and their partners. I've known men to come and say, I bought my woman because I wanted her to hear you, so that you could tell her, because you don't listen when I speak to her, but she might listen to you. And so that's really beautiful to know that I hold that.
Well, that is powerful, actually.
It really is.
Yeah. Or just talking about when you were working with Quincy and other comedians in Stratford, what was that like at the time?
Oh, when we done Big Sister, it was, you know what, it was going back. I was such a, come on, be on time. I was a stickler. So they used to laugh at me, but I'll be telling them off. And I got into many arguments with them and upset many of them. Victor Daniels was one of them. I'd upset him completely. But you know what? It was just part of it. And they understood me and understood the game. But it was nice coming together, because we became a family. you know, because we were the ones that were out all of that time and we couldn't get doors open. So I remember being at what's the place opposite Hackney Empire? Oceans. It was a place called Oceans. And so I was performing there, and I remember the promoters brought me on, and I was really doing the promotion for Big Sister. So you have to go out and do your 5 minutes, whatever. And I, you know, basically, begged, can we have 5 minutes, or, you know, and they said, yeah, we got one gal coming out. She's going to do 5 minutes comedy. And I was like, you what? Because they used to bring you out, especially women. Sometimes they bring you out disrespectfully. Like you'd have some promoters, they come out and say, she's a man eater. And you'd be like, have you heard my comedy? Would you just say that to every woman? So that then would get my back up, which is probably what they wanted. And I'd come out and go, I ain't no man eater, but I tell you what, if you come near me, I'll blow you up or whatever. And then they'll just go, ooh. And then you go back to your comedy, because you had to let them know, don't disrespect me, don't talk to me like that. So I think going out and doing that, and I remember when he said that, and I just, it gave, you know, I just tore it up for the 5 minutes, and then down the stage, like dropped the mic, and I was kind of gone. And that opened doors for Big Sister. So I don't know, it's things like that I miss, because it was good, but the way that females then were treated, you really had to fight against it.
Yeah.
I think I digressed a bit, but I apologize.
No, no, not all. These were all really great. These were all really great. But just talking about, you know, what you had to do within your career, what would you like to pass on to the next generation of comics?
Start reading. Start reading. Stop. Social media will tell you so much, but find out the truth. It's a bit like going to your doctor. The doctor, your general GP, is a general practitioner. He's practicing on you. So your best thing is to go and do some research. And sometimes it's not on the internet, it's in books. So when somebody finds out they're ill with something, that's when they go and find out all the information. And then they go, I'm going to do this and try and get well. I'm not just going to just listen to that side. I want to do 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what they need to do, because the more knowledge you have makes you the best comic in the world, or in any field. If you practice an hour a day of any field that you're in for 1 hour a day, by the 4 years, you could be talking around the world.
Yeah.
That's how powerful it is. So, and that's in any field. So that's what makes the difference. So I think sometimes people get caught up in the fame. They love the idea of it, but not wanting the work. And I was told that, you know, I was given that same advice by Tony Paleface. Tony Paleface is another one of my favorite comics. He said to me, don't get caught up in the fame of it, do the work. And I was like, okay. And that's the truth. Do the work. And when you do the work and you got the information, because wherever you are, if you got that knowledge, that information, even if your brain doesn't remember what you thought you wrote, it will come with something else, because it's got a library of information. And I think that's the biggest thing with today's comics. To my time, we could rely on other information, because you go and research that like a library, and that's the difference.
Mm,
So yeah, go learn your information is what I'd say. Knowledge is power, definitely.
yes, yeah, agreed, absolutely. From early in your career then, are there any mementos or keepsakes that you'd like to share with us, or that come to mind?
Oh my gosh, it's like what? Give me an example. What you mean? Sorry.
Are there just any kind of like the moments that you shared when you had someone in the audience that said they had cancer and they hadn't told anyone? Were there other moments like that that just really stood out
Oh,
to you?
yeah. There was a when I used to do a thing called Late Night Laughter at the cinema in Streatham, and it'd open at 11:30 at night. And people would still be late, you know, no matter it was 11:30, 12 o'clock. I think it's 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night, they were still late. And it was different people in the audience, which I loved, and they came from everywhere. And because once you put it in a cinema, they knew how to dress, they knew how to be, they knew they could be on a date, they knew what it was going to be like. And I remember and I used to do it like every 3 months, and there was a lady in there, and I'd get free gifts from these places. I'd be like, listen, I'm putting on the show, can you give me some free gifts? And I'd give them out to my audience. And there was an elder lady there with a younger lady. So I said, and I put the mic to her, I said, hey, I said, you thank you for supporting. You always come to my events. And I just wanted to say, you know, what makes you come? Da, 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 whatever. And she said, you know what? She goes, and you could tell that she was an ill person. She said, I don't get out very much. This is my carer. She said, but you know what? Every time I know your show's coming on, it inspires me and makes me feel better. So she goes, I don't mind spending the money. If it was double the money, I would still pay it. I pay for my carer too, and we have fun. I don't know how long I got to live, but I thank you so much, and don't give up. Well, the whole audience was clapping. I was crying because there's this woman in the audience, and I'm like, wow. And you don't know what you're doing. So all the other comics after that, they were tearing up, and their comedy was respecting her. So things like that make big changes. They just touch you. And that's another thing I want comics to realize. Of They probably don't realize how much they touch somebody's life. So be careful of your words, because as much as you're a comedian, don't just swear for the sake of swearing. Like, use your words wisely, because it changes people. We have the right. Somebody could have anxiety. You can change that. Somebody didn't know. Annette Fagan, who's another one of my favorite comics. Annette Fagan came to one of my. She wasn't a comic then. She came to one of the shows. I think we were doing. Quincy and I played Bonnie and Clyde. Our characters was Bonnie and Clyde at that point. So Quincy's got a love thing with me. Everybody in the comedy circuit knows nobody's allowed to chat me up. I'm his girl. He can have 50,000 women, but I'm in comedy world. I am his woman. Nobody's allowed to chat me up. Right? That's it. So we're Bonnie and Clyde. We've done this thing where we're Bonnie and Clyde. It was a tour that we were doing. I'm trying to think what it's called now, but we've done this tour, and Annette Fagan was in, I think she was in Leeds when we done this tour. We were in Leeds or Birmingham, I think it was. I think it was Leeds. And she was in the audience, and she came to me. She goes, thank you so much. She goes, I've always been told that I was too raw, but you let me know that your rawness, I can be a comedian. And so I'm going to go for it. And there she is. She's in it. So there's moments like that that are in your face. You kind of go, thank goodness for that, because had she not, she'd have sat there believing that she was something that she couldn't do. And my thing is, be who you want to be. If you look at people like Grace Jones is raw. She's in your face. She's a bit eccentric, but she's still known all over the world, and there's nobody like her. So we have to know that we are great wherever you decide you're great. I may not be somebody's cup of tea, but I'm somebody else's hardo bread and jollof rice. Do you know what I mean? I'm somebody else's. So you're not going to get on with everybody. Not everybody's going to like you, but don't be scared to be who you be. So that is probably a message I'd want to say to people. Be who you be, because life is short or long with the wrong people.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. What you have is sometimes exactly what other people need. So that is amazing.
Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
brilliant. This has been an amazing interview. Thank you so much for spending your time with
Thank
us.
you.
Are there any other plugs or anything you'd like to say, where we can find you, where we can keep up with what you're doing?
So I am on Insta as officially Donna Spence. My email's big sister Spence at yahoo.co.uk. Facebook, I'm there, Donna Spence. I'm more into health. I've always been into health, but I'm more into health now, into natural health. So you can see I'm Happy Health behind. Happy Health Emporium is where you can find me. So yeah, that's who I am, because health is laughter, laughter is health. So that's what I try to keep to.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
thank you so much. Keep on being amazing. Keep on doing your interviews. It's really lovely to see you as a young person doing what you're doing. So don't give up. Keep going.
thank you. Thank you for being so kind with me. This opportunity, it's been amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.